Okay, terms and conditions part 2 then. Listen really carefully to this, please. Your terms and conditions, even if they have been read and understood and accepted, are not legally binding unless they are legally fair. Right, we don't get to decide what we think's fair. It's what the law considers fair. You know, if we end up in small claims or in front of trading standards, if you piss off the wrong customer, especially for a decent amount of money, it's very easy for people to find out what their rights are. What I will say is no contract is watertight, even if written by a solicitor, because interpretations might depend on who judges or enforces anything against you. But having a contract and making sure that it's fair does reduce your risks. Right. If you create an unfair terms document and then you refuse to handle complaints in a lawful manner, the Consumer Rights Act could very well kick your ass in court. Refunding, it's always cheaper and easier than litigation. If your terms are fair, you're less likely to fall foul of complaints in the first place, and you're less likely to fall foul of the law if it does come to that. If you end up in court, the risks to you and your business are a lot more than just the cost of that order. If you lose, there might be compensation, there might be legal costs, fines, and trading standards taking an interest in you. So just always remember that consumer law overrides everything. I'm going to post the first link to, it's a gov.uk page about unfair consumer contracts. Long story short, what this document outlines is that you've got a responsibility under consumer law to do your fucking job properly, yeah? And you can't have terms and conditions in place that limit your responsibility to do your fucking job properly. Right, so your products have got to be as described. They've got to be of satisfactory quality, they've got to be fit for purpose. They must be supplied when you've agreed to supply them. They can't cause damage to people or property. If the customer cancels, they don't have to give you a reason, and you can't keep any and all upfront payments, right? You can only cover your reasonable losses. You can't charge hidden fees. You can't cancel, leaving the customer having paid for things that they haven't received. So if your terms and conditions go against this stuff, they are likely to be deemed unfair. The second link is a massive document. It's really long and complicated. This is the assets.publishing.service.gov one. Having waded through it with a decent amount of caffeine and prior knowledge about such things and a helpful solicitor friend, I'm going to translate it into cake industry specific examples. So it's taken me a while, but basically wading through it, the first thing that comes up that does apply to us, a term is likely to be unfair if it is imbalanced in favour of the supplier. Secondly, your terms should be clear and easy to read, so do not try and speak legalese. I've already told you this, yeah? The guidelines actually strongly advise against using jargon, and anything that disadvantages the customer, like loss of advance payments if they cancel, should be highlighted in some way so that they know and understand upfront what they're agreeing to without having to read like essays of tiny print in complicated language. They must also have the opportunity to read through before paying, so don't try and rush payments. We like to get the quote accepted, send confirmation and get that money straight away, but legally they must be given time to read through first, just as we would expect anywhere else. So if they then disagree with any of them terms, they've got the choice to back out of the order. So reading more into it, we can't put anything in there that limits our public or product liability, meaning, causing injury or death because of something we've done or neglected to do. An example of us trying to limit that public and product liability would be, say if we get a dairy allergen complaint from somebody who was at the party. If you've labelled that cake as dairy free and it wasn't, you can't have it in your terms that only the buyer can make complaints. You can put it in there that only the buyer can receive refunds, but in terms of public and product liability issues, there's a lot more involved there than just a refund. Consider burn away cakes, supplying cake sparklers, toppers with sharp skewers, right? Even if we've bought them in, we've provided them to the customer, so the liability is ours. Any terms like, things being used at their own risk, at the client's own risk, that phrase is limiting your liability, so would very likely be classed an unfair term. You can't tell them in your terms not to go to environmental health or to trading standards, because they've got a right to do so. Even if you think they're in the wrong, they've got a legal right to do so. It all sounds really scary, but again, it just comes down to do your fucking job properly. By this point, if you follow me content from the beginning, you're going to be doing that anyway. I've taught you this stuff, haven't I? And my next step is going to be the customer service course, by which point you will have everything you need to be open and trading legally. So no excuses, the knowledge is out there. Next, in this document, it goes into statutory rights. So, as described, fit for purpose, satisfactory quality. Be very careful, I would suggest, about saying complaints regarding flavour will not be accepted because taste is subjective. I do see that written. This may be seen as unfair, right? We are human, we can make mistakes with recipes. So refusing such complaints point blank, that's taking away the customer's right to complain about what they believe is an unsatisfactory product. You might have made that recipe 100 times, but this time your supermarket cocoa might have changed grower. The new stuff might be shit. Your oven might have been working a little bit wonky. So don't believe that you can't make mistakes. You cannot limit your liability for doing things wrong. So you can't include terms that limit people's automatic consumer rights. So saying that they've got to examine the cake before they take it, or if you insist on a signature saying, yep, everything's correct, that doesn't mean you haven't got to put things wrong if you're at fault. What if it's the husband collecting? What if they just don't notice that the name's spelt wrong because there's so much going on cake? What if they're too nervous to tell you at door? If you've given them a 7-inch cake and they've asked for an 8-inch, they might not realise that at door, or they might not remember exactly what size they ordered. But you've still made that mistake. You've still not fulfilled your side of the contract. So that means you've got a refund, even if they've signed to say all is good at first sight. You've not conformed to contract. You're in a refund situation. Right. Groups 2C, limitations of liability. Under this section, be careful about anything like a credit note type situation, where they don't receive money back. A really common thing in our industry is to try and limit refunds to like a box of apology cupcakes or a discount off a future order. I personally hate that one. If they're really unhappy with what they've given, they're not going to order from you again. So if their statutory rights haven't been met, they are entitled to a money refund. It depends on how big the complaint is. If it's a minor slip up and they're quite chilled out about it, those goodwill gestures are often acceptable. But in your terms, you can't limit your liability to what the law would see as like a credit note situation. A faulty cake, one that doesn't match the order confirmation, means a full refund or a full repair or replacement, not a discount off a future order. You can't, I've told you about this before, but I'm going to repeat it. You can't limit your liability for delay of supply, right? It doesn't hurt to deja vu you with this one. Set a time of delivery or collection. Make sure that cake is completed, right? Don't say every effort will be made unless every single effort will be made. It's your responsibility to make sure you know about roadworks. It's easy to check on Google how busy the route is, and please have the product ready for collection or arrange delivery time for well before the event begins. I'd never recommend delivering at the start of the party, having them pick up on the day, because then if there's a mistake on your part, you haven't got time to put it right, and that would mean a refund rather than a correction, which would be a lot cheaper for you to do. Right, terms such as force majeure, right, might have been used during COVID. They're best avoided unless very clearly explained. It refers to things like fire and flood, acts of God type situations that are out of our control. You can use easy to understand words, so please do so. Right, further in, we're getting to cancellations and advance payments. So first of all, if you cancel, whatever the reason, without fault of the customer, they're entitled to a full refund. But if you've supplied taster samples that they've eaten, if you've supplied a bespoke design that you're allowing them to take to another cake maker, you can possibly keep that part of the payment depending on circumstances, because you can prove you've already earned it and they've received that work. But if you won't let them take that design elsewhere, or if every other local cake maker refuses to your design, they haven't got the benefit of that work, so you can't really keep that money for that if you need to cancel. I would imagine that would be deemed unfair. So you can't say that any prepayment, whatever you might call it, you can't say that a prepayment is non-refundable under all circumstances, especially if you're asking for a substantial amount to secure the booking. So please don't ask for like a 50% non-refundable booking fee. I know a lot of you do. I'm not having a go. I'm trying to get you to protect yourselves. Any term that can be seen as a penalty for cancellation is likely unfair as well, like a specific cancellation charge or anything that's not justified by the work that you've done, money you've already spent, losses you will incur that you can't recoup elsewhere. If you're only a wedding cake business, you're unlikely to fill a cancelled slot at a month's notice. But, in small claims, will that stand up? We don't know, do we? What would you have done that weekend if you didn't have a booking at all? Can you prove that you've turned down other work for that date that you've now missed out on? So do just be careful about justifying your losses. Right, section 4.6. This is where the legal definition of a deposit is. It's a reservation fee, not an advance payment. So paying that means that date is reserved for them and you will be turning away other orders for that slot. It can be kept if justifiable, but it can't be more than a small percentage of the price, it says here, and they don't define what small percentage means. So try to make it clear in your terms regarding keeping any of these advance payments, what those payments cover and how much they will be expected to be, such as cancellation of a big party cake within 2 weeks of supply. That might be 75% payment that you accept because materials will be bought by then, toppers will be made and you're less likely to rebook something else in at that short notice. Just remember, whatever they've paid for is technically theirs. So if you withhold money for toppers, you should rightfully give them the toppers. This is why you do your pricing properly in the first place, so you can easily judge the value of the work that you've done so far. So section 6.2.3. If you cancel at the client's fault because they haven't paid or they've changed the order to something that you can't or won't or don't do, just be careful your terms don't say that you are keeping all prepayments in all situations. You've got to be able to prove your losses still. When it comes to cancelling the order when they are at fault, like for example, if they haven't made payment when agreed or they want to make changes you can't accommodate, be very careful about having terms that mean you keeping any payments. You can only keep what's fair. So like a small deposit, which remember, that's defined as a reservation fee for that date. So if you can sell something else for that day, you might not be justified keeping the fee. I can hear your responses to that in my head, but this comes from an official document. This is why I'm posting links for you. You can see for yourself and not get yourself into bother, right? I'm just trying to help. So under Group 12, we've got price variation clauses, right? This section would apply to us in the case of taking a deposit or a booking fee or a save the date fee for a wedding cake before confirming all the design and the size and therefore the price. You can't bind them into a product if they don't know how much it's going to cost. It is common to do that in this industry, £100 upfront for consultation and tasters. Before you provide and charge for that, give them a very good idea, at least of a starting price or an average price, like well ahead of time, so you can return their deposit and book somebody else in if it turns out they've got like champagne taste with Capri Sun pay packets, yeah? They need at least a ballpark figure. So find out their guest numbers, maybe send details of other cakes that you've done, with example prices that'll be that same size. Don't let them pay £50 or £100 up front if they're expecting the whole cake to be 250 quid when your wedding cake starts at 700. Like, they can't be left worse off for cancelling if they can't afford your prices. Hidden charges, I've already covered this previously, but any extra add-on charges like delivery, late collection fees, which looking at this might be deemed unfair, you're going to need to make it clear why you would suffer financial loss if they are late. Hidden charges must be highlighted and made very clear. Section 18.5.5, don't worry, I'm nearly done. Be careful of your wording, right, as you read this. Don't put, by making payment, you signify you have read and understood these terms. Put, please make sure you've read and understood these terms. Don't have a blanket statement of no refunds if you cancel, but you can say you may not receive a full refund on cancellation if it is too short notice, your date can't be filled, or if work's already been done. Right, so now I've bamboozled you It's time to create your actual fair terms and conditions document. By all means, you can go through the last few lessons I've done and take notes and create them from that. Or if you'd like to purchase a template that I've created from this knowledge, that took me weeks to wade through and to double check and to cross-reference, right, I'm going to post you the link to that document. You download it, you swap and change out your details to fit your specific way of working. But yeah, while you're over on my membership page, my little shop, have a nosy back, see what else takes your fancy. Right.